What do you do when the life you built collapses in a single overheard conversation? I'm Joseph Hayes, 41, a tech guy who codes solutions for a living, married to Alice for 15 years with two kids, Alina, 14, and Caspian, 10. We had a good life in our Seattle suburb, a cozy house with glowing windows and Alice's lavender candles always burning. But last spring, I came home early from a business trip, rain hammering my windshield, eager to surprise my family. The house was quiet, except for a pulsing beat upstairs, not Alice's usual Mozart. I crept up, planning to jump out and make the kids laugh. Then I heard her voice through our cracked bedroom door, sharp and cold, nothing like the woman I loved. "He's so easy to read." "Robert," she laughed. "Once the papers are signed, I'll have it all, half his company, the house, everything." My heart stopped. "Robert, papers?" I stood frozen in the hallway's shadows, a ghost in my own home as she kept talking. "The lawyer says it's airtight. He's too buried in his tech to notice." Her words sliced through 15 years of memories: our first dance, Alina's birth, Caspian's first steps. She was planning to gut me financially, take the kids, and run off with this Robert. My pulse pounded, but I didn't barge in. I'm a programmer. I don't react on impulse. I collect data, analyze patterns, execute solutions. She mocked my devotion to the kids, saying they'd be fine without me, a lie that stung worse than her betrayal. I slipped out, sat in my car for an hour, rain blurring the world, processing. This wasn't just cheating, it was a calculated plan to erase me. But Alice made a fatal error. She thought I'd break down. Instead, I drove back later, kissed her hello, and started planning the most meticulous takedown of my life. The next morning, I woke up like nothing happened. Bacon sizzled in the kitchen, Caspian was building a Lego fortress, Alina was glued to her phone. Alice smiled over coffee, her phone buzzing with texts she didn't hide. I smiled back, my mind already 3 steps ahead. I'd always been the steady one, the dad who never missed a soccer game or parent-teacher conference, while Alice was perpetually late, distracted, her mind elsewhere. Now I saw why. Her words from the night before looped in my head. "He has no idea." She was wrong. I spent that day in my home office, supposedly catching up on emails, but really digging into our finances. Joint accounts, investments, my company's equity, everything she thought she'd claim. I called our family lawyer under the guise of updating my will, asking pointed questions about our prenup signed in a haze of love 15 years ago. It was ironclad, a detail Alice had overlooked. By evening, I was back at the dinner table, passing mashed potatoes, asking Caspian about school, while Alice's phone lit up again. She excused herself to take a call, and I noted the time, the frequency, the pattern. I wasn't just a betrayed husband. I was a detective now building a case. The kids didn't notice the shift, but I felt it, a cold clarity settling over me. I kissed Alice goodnight, her lips tasteless, and lay awake, mapping out my next move. This wasn't about revenge yet. It was about survival. I'd protect what was mine, my kids, my life, my future. Alice thought she was playing chess, but I was rewriting the board. I spent the next 7 days wearing a mask, playing the perfect husband, while the ground beneath me burned. Each morning I kissed Alice good morning, her perfume now a bitter reminder of her betrayal. I helped Caspian with his math homework, his small fingers gripping the pencil as he grinned up at me, oblivious. Alina, sharp as ever, gave me a look once, like she sensed something off but said nothing. At night, I'd sit at the dinner table passing the green beans, making small talk about Alice's yoga class or my latest coding project while her phone buzzed relentlessly. She'd glance at it, smile, and type quick replies, thinking I was blind. I wasn't. I was collecting data, every text, every late-night errand, every lie. My home office became my war room. I pulled bank statements, tracked withdrawals, and found a pattern of unexplained charges. Dinners, hotels, gifts. I mirrored her phone's activity through a discrete app I'd coded years ago for a client, logging every call to Robert's number. I met with my company's lawyers, pretending to discuss a new partnership, but really securing my shares and assets. The prenup, thank God, was a fortress. Alice had signed it without a second glance, too in love, or so I thought, to care about the fine print. It protected my company, my savings, everything I'd built. I didn't sleep much, my mind racing with scenarios, outcomes, probabilities. I wasn't just saving my finances, I was saving my kids from her chaos. By day 5, I had enough to bury her, but I needed more proof of her affair. something undeniable for court. I started subtle joining Robert's gym across town, signing up for a trial class. The staff were chatty, especially when I played the clueless tech dad asking about trainers. "Oh, Robert. He's always with that blonde," Alice once said, unaware of the bomb they'd dropped. I nodded, heart pounding, and kept digging. Social media was a goldmine. Alice wasn't careful. Photos of her and Robert at wine bars tagged locations matching her work trips. I screenshot everything, my hands steady but my chest tight. The kids were my anchor. One night Caspian crawled into my lap asking why I looked tired. "Just work, buddy," I lied, ruffling his hair. Alina, though, wasn't fooled. She caught me in the kitchen, her voice low. "Dad, is Mom okay?" "She's been weird." I deflected, but her eyes held mine too long. She knew something, and it killed me she might carry that weight. On day 7, I finalized my plan. I'd let Alice make her move, let her think she'd won, then turn her game against her. That night I cooked her favorite pasta, poured wine, and watched her laugh, oblivious to the storm coming. I almost pitied her, almost. She'd underestimated me, thought I was just a predictable nerd lost in code. But I was writing a new script, one where she'd lose everything she thought she'd steal. The morning of day 8 dawned bright and crisp, a Sunday, where the kids were upstairs in their rooms, Alina blasting her indie rock playlist, and Caspian probably deep in a video game. I was in the kitchen flipping pancakes like it was any other weekend, the smell of maple syrup filling the air, masking the tension coiling in my gut. Alice appeared then, descending the stairs like a queen ready for conquest, her silk blouse shimmering under the light makeup, flawless hair pinned just so. She clutched a yellow envelope in her manicured hands, wielding it like a dagger. I knew this was it, the move she'd rehearsed in her mind, the one where I'd crumble and beg. "We need to talk, Joseph," she said, her voice steady, but laced with that smug undertone I'd come to recognize. She sat across from me at the table, sliding the envelope over with deliberate slowness, her eyes locked on mine, waiting for the explosion. "This marriage isn't working anymore. It's time we faced it." The words hung there heavy as the rain that had started pattering against the windows again, a Seattle staple that now felt like an omen. I picked up the envelope without a word, feeling the crisp paper under my fingers, and pulled out the stack of divorce papers. Her lawyer's letterhead stared back at me, demanding half of everything, the house, my savings, even equity in my tech company. She leaned back, crossing her arms, that confident smirk playing on her lips, expecting tears or rage or desperate pleas. Part of me wanted to laugh at how wrong she was, how she'd scripted this scene without accounting for my rewrite. Instead, I read through every page methodically, my programmer's eye scanning for details, noting the clauses she'd highlighted in yellow, the ones that assumed I'd roll over. The kids' laughter filtered down from upstairs, a stark contrast to the silence between us. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the anniversary pen she'd given me on our 10th, the silver one, engraved with our initials, now a relic of a love long dead. With steady hands, I signed every line, every page, the ink flowing smooth and final. There. I slid the papers back to her, meeting her gaze evenly. "Anything else?" Her face was a masterpiece of shock, eyes widening, mouth parting slightly, the color draining just a touch from her cheeks. This wasn't the script. She'd rehearsed my breakdown, my arguments, maybe even my hands shaking as I refused to sign. "That's it," she stammered, her voice cracking for the first time. "No fight, no begging. You want out, you've got it." I leaned back, sipping my coffee, the bitterness mirroring the moment. She recovered fast, that cold smirk snapping back into place like a mask. "My lawyer will call yours about the kids and the money. This is just the start." Of course, I thought, but what Alice didn't know was that I'd already spoken to my lawyers multiple times that week, fortifying my position. The prenup she'd signed without reading carefully back when we were young and invincible was ironclad, a wall she'd never breach. It protected my company outright, my premarital assets, and I'd made financial moves in those 7 days, all legal and traced, meticulously transferring funds into trusts, securing loans against shared property in ways that left her claims hollow. Devastating to her plans, yes, but fair in the eyes of the law. She stood up abruptly, envelope in hand, her heels clicking on the tile as she turned away, but I saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes, the first crack in her armor. We told the kids that night after a dinner where the tension was thick enough to cut. Caspian was building a tower with his fries, Alina scrolling her phone under the table. Alice and I sat them down in the living room, the lavender candle flickering mockingly on the coffee table. Mom and Dad are going to live apart. I started keeping my voice even, while Alice nodded, her eyes glassy. Caspian burst into tears, throwing his arms around her, begging her not to go, his small body shaking. Please, Mommy, stay. It tore at me watching his innocence shatter, but Alina just sat there eerily calm for a 14-year-old, her face a blank slate. She excused herself quietly and went to her room, the door clicking shut like a period at the end of our family story. Later, when I knocked to check on her, she was curled on her bed with a book, but her eyes were red-rimmed. I sat beside her, the mattress dipping, and she looked up. Is she leaving for Robert from the gym, the guy she's always texting? My stomach dropped. My own daughter had pieced it together. You knew. She shrugged, a mix of anger and sadness in her voice. I'm not dumb, Dad. She didn't even try to hide it. You deserve better. Her words were a balm and a blade confirming Alice's sloppiness, her arrogance in assuming no one noticed. I hugged her tight, promising we'd be okay, but inside a new fire ignited. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about protecting them from her web of lies. That conversation with Alina shifted something in me, turning my quiet resolve into a deeper investigation. I couldn't stop now. The patterns I'd uncovered at the gym and online hinted at more than a fling. But first, I had to let the divorce machinery grind forward, knowing my preparations had already tilted the scales. Alice moved out the next day to a hotel, her bags packed with that same smug efficiency, but I saw the uncertainty in her posture. She'd thought this would be easy, a clean cut where she walked away rich and free. Instead, she'd awakened a side of me she never knew existed, the analyst who saw every flaw in her code. The days after Alice moved out felt like living in a house with missing walls, the air sharp with absence. I kept the kids' routines steady, school drop-offs, soccer practice, helping Caspian with his spelling tests, while my mind churned through Alina's revelation about Robert. Her words, "I'm not dumb," Dad echoed, a reminder that Alice's arrogance had left clues even a teenager could spot. I sat in my home office late at night, the glow of my monitor casting shadows, diving deeper into the digital trail Alice left. Her social media was a careless archive, check-ins at restaurants with Robert, a tagged photo at a jazz club I didn't know she liked, her smile too bright, his arm too close. I cross-referenced dates with her work trips and found overlaps, lies stacking like bad code. But a nagging dread grew. If she'd been this reckless, how long had this been going on? And worse, what did it mean for Alina and Caspian? The thought hit me like a power surge. Were they even mine? The question felt like a betrayal of the kids I'd raised, but I had to know. I called in sick for the first time in years, drove to a clinic across town, and paid for rush paternity tests using toothbrushes from the kids' bathroom. My hands shook as I handed over the samples, the technician's neutral face a small mercy. Waiting for the results was torture. I kept up the dad routine, grilling burgers, joking with Caspian about his soccer moves, helping Alina debug a coding project for school. She was a natural, her fingers flying over the keyboard, and I wondered if she'd inherited my knack for patterns or if that was just wishful thinking. At night, I'd check my email compulsively, dreading the truth, but needing it. On day 5, the email landed, a cold subject line: test results. I locked my office door, heart pounding like a server crash, and opened the attachment. 0% match. Neither Alina nor Caspian was biologically mine. The room spun, the numbers on the screen blurring into 15 years of memories, teaching Alina to ride a bike, bandaging Caspian's scraped knees, bedtime stories. I wanted to scream, to smash something, but I just sat there breathing, processing. They were still my kids. Every laugh, every hug, every moment we'd built together was real. But this truth was a weapon, one I'd use to protect them from Alice's lies. I started digging again, this time with a new edge. I went back to Robert's gym, blending in with the morning crowd, chatting up a trainer over protein shakes. Alice and Robert. Yeah, they're tight, he said casually, wiping down equipment. Been that way for years, not just recent. Years. The word hit like a punch. I nodded, kept my face neutral, and probed further. Gym gossip was gold. Staff mentioned Alice with other guys. Over time, a businessman. When Alina was born, an artist around Caspian's birth. I cross-checked names online, found old posts, emails she hadn't deleted from a shared account. The affair with Robert was just the latest in a string stretching back a decade. She'd been playing me for a fool since before the kids were born, her confidence built on my trust. I printed the paternity results, tucked them into a white envelope, and planned my next move. Alice thought she'd scripted the perfect exit, but she'd left too many loose ends. The kids started asking questions. Caspian caught me staring into space one night and climbed into my lap. "Is Mom coming back?" he asked, his voice small. I hugged him, promising we'd figure it out, but my heart ached. Alina was different. She withdrew her usual chatter, replaced by silence. One evening, she cornered me in the garage, her voice low. "Dad, I saw Mom's texts. She's been lying forever, hasn't she?" I didn't lie to her. "Yeah, kiddo. But we're going to be okay." She nodded, her jaw tight, and I saw my own resolve in her eyes. She was tougher than I'd realized, carrying her own hurt, but still protecting her little brother. I started teaching her more coding late-night sessions where we built simple apps, a way to keep her close to rebuild what Alice had cracked. Alice called, once her voice all business, asking about the kids' schedules. I kept it short, noting her tone still confident, still unaware I held the upper hand. My lawyers were ready, the prenup locked tight, and now I had proof of her infidelity and the paternity bombshell. I didn't want to hurt the kids, but I'd use it in court if I had to. I pictured her face when she learned the truth, her smugness crumbling. But the image didn't satisfy me as much as I'd expected. It just felt heavy, like carrying a weight I didn't want. Still, I kept moving forward, my plan a lifeline. The restaurant where I'd proposed Chateau Blanc was my next stage. I knew Alice and Robert went there, her expensive tastes constant. I'd wait for the right moment, envelope in hand, to rewrite her ending. I knew Alice and Robert frequented Chateau Blanc, the restaurant where I'd proposed 15 years ago, its glass chandeliers and white tablecloths, now a backdrop for their betrayal. I'd been tracking their patterns, her social media posts, his gym schedule, the receipts I'd found in her car's glove box. On a rainy Thursday night, I dressed in my best suit, the one I wore to pitch my company's biggest client, and slipped the white envelope with the paternity results into my pocket. My hands were steady, but my pulse thrummed like a server underload as I drove through Seattle's slick streets, the city lights blurring in the downpour. I parked across from the restaurant, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows until I spotted them at what used to be our table, toasting with champagne, her laugh cutting through the glass. It was now or never. I walked in, the maitre d' nodding as I strode past, my face calm, but my mind razor-sharp. The envelope felt heavy, a grenade I was ready to pull the pin on. I approached their table, the clink of glasses and murmurs of other diners fading into a dull hum. "Hello, Alice." "Robert," I said, my voice even almost pleasant. Alice's champagne smile froze her glass, hovering mid-air. Robert's shoulders tensed, his gym bro confidence faltering. "What a surprise," Alice managed, her tone brittle, eyes darting as if searching for an exit. I smiled, thin and deliberate. "I came to offer congratulations. On your freedom." I placed the envelope on the table, its stark white standing out against the pristine cloth. "A small gift." Alice's fingers twitched, wary now. "What is it?" she asked, her voice tight. "Open it and see," I said, stepping back but staying close enough to watch. I positioned myself near the bar, blending into the crowd, my eyes locked on their table like a debugger scanning code. Alice opened the envelope with shaking fingers, pulling out the paternity results. Her face drained of color, the papers trembling as she read the numbers, 0% match for both kids. She passed them to Robert, whose expression shifted from confusion to realization to raw fury. "You told me they were his," he shouted loud enough that nearby tables turned forks, pausing mid-bite. Alice hissed back, "I thought they were—" Her voice cracked, desperation creeping in. I stepped closer, unable to resist. "No, you knew, or at least suspected," I said, my tone ice cold. "The timing matches, doesn't it? That businessman, when Alina was conceived, the artist around Caspian's time." Robert stood so fast his chair toppled, crashing against the polished floor. "You said I was the only one besides him," he spat, pointing at me. His face twisted with disgust. "Robert, please, I can explain," Alice stammered, but he cut her off. "Save it, we're done." He threw his napkin down, storming out, leaving her alone at the table, the champagne flat, her master plan in ruins. I leaned down close enough to smell her perfume, now sour to me. "Enjoy explaining this to your lawyer," I said softly. "Should make the custody hearing interesting." Her eyes met mine, wide with panic, but I turned and walked out, the rain cool against my face, as I left her sitting there surrounded by curious stares. The drive home was quiet, my mind replaying her shock, his rage, the way her world had crumbled in seconds. It should have felt like victory, but it was hollow, like debugging a program only to find it was never worth running. At home, I found Alina in the living room sketching on her tablet. She looked up, reading my face. "Did you talk to Mom?" she asked quietly. I nodded, not ready to share the details. "It's going to be okay, kiddo," I said, ruffling her hair. She didn't push, just leaned into me, and I held her, grounding myself in what mattered. The next morning, my phone buzzed with voicemails from Alice, first angry, then frantic, then pleading. "Joseph, how could you? Call me back. We need to talk." I saved them all, forwarding them to my lawyer without responding. Each message was another piece of evidence. Her desperation, a contrast to the cold confidence she'd wielded a week ago. I focused on the kids taking Caspian to soccer practice, cheering louder than usual as he scored, his grin lighting up the field. Alina joined us for ice cream after, and we talked about her coding project, a game she was building for school. Their normalcy kept me steady, but the paternity truth gnawed at me. I hadn't told them yet, maybe I never would, but it fueled my resolve. Alice had gambled everything assuming I'd fold. Instead, I was rewriting the rules, and the next move was the courtroom where her lies would face a judge's scrutiny. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and old coffee, a sterile contrast to the chaos of my thoughts as I sat beside my lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire, who'd dissected Alice's claims with surgical precision. Judge Harmon, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, with steel-gray hair, presided over the hearing, her gavel a quiet thread on the bench. Alice sat across the room, her lawyer whispering furiously, but her posture was different now, less regal, more brittle, like a porcelain figure cracked at the edges. The paternity results, the screenshots of her texts, the years of infidelity laid out in my lawyer's binder, it was all there. A program I'd debugged to perfection. Claire presented the evidence methodically. Alice's affair with Robert confirmed by gym staff statements, the financial records showing her lavish spending on business trips, the prenup that locked her out of my company and premarital assets. The paternity tests were the final blow, though I'd hesitated to use them, not wanting to hurt the kids. But Claire insisted they'd strengthen my case for custody and nullify Alice's claims to more than her fair share. Judge Harmon's eyes narrowed as she read the results, her pen tapping the bench. "Mrs. Hayes," she said, voice like gravel, "did you read the divorce agreement before signing?" Alice fidgeted, her silk scarf suddenly too tight. "I skimmed it. I was upset. Did Mr. Hayes prevent you from obtaining legal counsel?" "No. But the court cannot protect people from their own poor decisions," the judge cut in, her gavel slamming down. Alice kept what was in her name, a modest savings account, her car, some jewelry. I kept everything else, the house, my company, and full custody of Alina and Caspian, with Alice granted limited visitation. Outside the courthouse, rain streaked the steps and Alice cornered me, her face a mix of fury and defeat. "You've ruined me, Joseph. I have nothing left." Her voice trembled, but I felt no pity, only exhaustion. "You have what you came into this marriage with," I said. "Your freedom. Isn't that what you wanted?" Her eyes flashed, searching for a comeback, but none came. "Where am I supposed to go?" "What about the kids?" she demanded. "Maybe ask one of their real fathers for help," I said, turning away as her face crumpled. The words were sharp, meant to cut, but they left me feeling hollow, like I'd debugged a program only to find it obsolete. I drove home, the kids waiting with pizza and a movie, their laughter a lifeline pulling me back to what mattered. But I wasn't done. That evening, I sent an anonymous tip to the Financial Regulatory Board about Robert's gym, hinting at questionable funding, cash deposits that didn't match his books, whispers I'd overheard at the gym. I'd done my homework, cross-referencing public records with gossip. Within days, his accounts were frozen, his gym under audit. Robert called me furious, his voice crackling through the phone. "You tipped them off, didn't you?" "Alice had to move out because I can't pay for anything." I stayed calm, my voice a flat line. "I don't know what you mean. Sounds unfortunate." "She's got nowhere to go now," he shouted. "Not my problem anymore," I said, hanging up. Alice's downfall was swift. She found a tiny apartment, took a job at a local cafe, her manicured hands now scrubbing tables. She called the kids sporadically, her voice strained through the phone. Caspian answered, hopeful, but Alina refused, her hurt too raw. One night, Caspian cried after a call, saying, "Mom sounds sad." I hugged him, promising we'd get through it, but my heart ached for his confusion. Alina, meanwhile, threw herself into coding her game project, growing more complex, a mirror of her inner resilience. I watched them both marveling at their strength, but the weight of those paternity results lingered. They were still my kids, biology be damned, but the lie of 15 years stung a wound I hadn't fully processed. Alice called me one rainy evening, soaked and desperate, standing outside her apartment facing eviction. "I need help, Joseph, for the kids' sake," she pleaded. I wanted to slam the door, let her drown in her choices, but I thought of Caspian's tears, Alina's silence. I paid 1 month's rent, nothing more. "There are conditions," I told her, my voice hard. "Get a job, stick to the visitation schedule, and this is the last time." She nodded, rain streaking her face, and left without another word. I watched her go, a broken figure fading into the storm, and felt no triumph, only a strange emptiness. The real fight now was keeping the kids whole, shielding them from her wreckage while building something new from the ashes. The months after the courtroom felt like rebuilding a crashed system, line by line, with the kids as my anchor. Alina threw herself into her coding, her game project now a sprawling fantasy world she'd pour hours into her focus, a quiet rebellion against the chaos Alice left. Caspian still asked about his mom, his voice small during our bedtime talks, but he'd light up when we kicked a soccer ball in the backyard, his laughter a reminder of what we still had. I kept their routines tight, school homework, pizza Fridays, while processing the emptiness. Alice's absence left like a bug in the code I couldn't quite trace. Her calls to the kids grew less frequent, her cafe job barely covering her rent. One stormy night, she showed up at our door, soaked to the bone, her eyes hollow. "I lost my job, Joseph. I'm facing eviction again," she said, voice cracking. "Please, for Alina and Caspian." I stood in the doorway, rain drumming the porch, and saw Caspian peeking from the stairs, his face hopeful but scared. I wanted to shut her out, let her sink, but his eyes stopped me. I wrote a check for another month's rent, my jaw tight. "This is for them, not you," I said. "Get it together, Alice, or you'll lose them for good." She nodded, clutching the check, and vanished into the rain, a ghost of the woman I'd once loved. Life kept moving, and so did I. A tech conference in Portland changed everything. I was presenting a new algorithm, my voice steady despite the sleepless nights, when Serafina caught my eye in the audience. Brilliant, a data scientist with a sharp mind and a laugh that cut through my defenses. We talked over coffee, then dinner, her questions about my work sparking something I hadn't felt in years. She wasn't just smart, she was kind, grounded, the opposite of Alice's calculated charm. I told her about the kids early on, expecting her to bolt, but she leaned in, curious, asking about Alina's coding and Caspian's soccer dreams. Our first date stretched into a weekend, then regular calls, her voice a warm thread pulling me out of the dark. I brought her to meet the kids a month later, nervous as hell, but Alina grilled her on Python frameworks while Caspian showed off his Lego builds. Serafina fit like a missing piece we didn't know we needed, and soon our house echoed with laughter again. The lavender candles replaced by her citrus-scented ones. Alice, meanwhile, scraped by in her tiny apartment, her calls to the kids shorter, more strained. Caspian still answered, craving her attention, but Alina stayed cold, sending only a curt text when Alice begged for a call. I didn't push her. She'd earned her anger. I focused on building, not breaking, taking the kids camping, teaching Alina to debug complex code, cheering Caspian's goals. Serafina joined us for game nights, her competitive streak making Caspian howl with laughter when she lost at Uno. One evening, after the kids were asleep, she took my hand on the couch, her eyes soft. "You're doing right by them, Joseph. They're lucky to have you." I kissed her, feeling a warmth I thought I'd lost forever. 6 months post-divorce, I proposed to her, under the same stars where I'd once dreamed of a future with Alice. She said yes, her smile brighter than the night sky, and the kids were thrilled already, calling her Sarah, like she'd always been there. We found out she was pregnant soon after, a new life we hadn't planned, but welcomed the kids, buzzing about being big siblings. I kept tabs on Alice, not out of care, but caution. She'd found a new job, some admin gig, and moved to a slightly better apartment. Her visits with Caspian were sporadic, always supervised, and he'd come back quiet, processing her promises that rarely held. Alina still refused to see her, though she sent a birthday card once, a small crack in her armor. I didn't push. They'd heal on their own terms. Serafina and I planned a small wedding, just us, the kids, and a few friends set for next month. The house felt full again, not with Alice's ghosts, but with new memories. Serafina's laughter, Alina's code running smoothly, Caspian's soccer trophies lining the shelf. The past was still there, a shadow in the corner, but it was fading. I'd won not by destroying Alice, but by creating something stronger, something real. The kids were thriving. Serafina was my partner in every sense, and the future felt like a clean slate ready for us to write. The rain had stopped, leaving a crisp Seattle night where the stars peeked through the clouds, a rarity that felt like a gift. I stood in our backyard, Serafina's hand warm in mine, her engagement ring catching the moonlight as we watched the sky. Alina was inside debugging her latest coding project, her laughter filtering through the open window when Caspian teased her about a glitch. He'd just finished showing us his new soccer tricks, his face flushed with pride, already talking about being a big brother when the baby arrived. Our small wedding was weeks away, a simple ceremony planned at a lakeside park, just us, the kids, and a few friends. Life felt full, not perfect, but whole, like a program finally running clean after years of errors. Yet tucked in my desk drawer, an unopened letter from Alice sat like a ghost I hadn't banished. She'd sent it from Chicago, where she'd moved for a better job, some office role that paid enough to stabilize her. I hadn't read it, didn't plan to. Whatever apology or excuse it held belonged to a past I'd outgrown. I told Caspian once when he asked if I was still mad at his mom, "Anger's like carrying hot coals, buddy. It burns you more than anyone else." I let that go. He nodded thoughtful and ran off to kick his ball, but his question lingered, a reminder of how far we'd come. Alice was rebuilding slowly. She called Caspian more regularly now, her voice steadier through the phone, and he'd visit her in Chicago sometimes, coming back with stories of her new apartment, her attempts at baking cookies that always burned. Alina still kept her distance. Her hurt a quiet wall, though she'd softened enough to send a Christmas card, her handwriting sharp but deliberate. I didn't push either of them. Their relationship with their mother was theirs to navigate. My focus was here, Serafina's laughter as she planned nursery colors, Alina's full scholarship to a computer science program next year, Caspian's soccer team heading to regionals. Serafina brought out the best in us, her warmth a contrast to Alice's calculated charm. She'd sit with Alina geeking out over algorithms or cheer louder than anyone at Caspian's games, her voice hoarse by the end. The kids adored her, and I loved her in a way I hadn't thought possible after Alice's betrayal, a love built on trust, not illusion. Looking back, the revenge I'd orchestrated felt small, now almost petty. Tipping off the authorities about Robert's gym, watching Alice's plans crumble at Chateau Blanc, the courtroom victory, it had been satisfying then, like solving a complex bug. But satisfaction faded, leaving only the life I'd built in its place. Destroying Alice hadn't healed me. Creating this had. The man who stood frozen in that hallway hearing his wife plot his ruin was gone. In his place was someone who'd learned that the best revenge isn't tearing down, it's building up, crafting a life so complete the past becomes a distant echo. I squeezed Serafina's hand, her smile soft in the starlight, and thought of our baby, the wedding, the kids' futures. The past was dead, its weight lifted, and we'd won, not by breaking Alice, but by thriving without her. The stars above us seemed to pulse, a quiet promise of unwritten days. I pulled Serafina close, her citrus scent grounding me, and we stood there, the kids' voices a soft hum inside the night, wrapping us in possibility. Whatever Alice's letter held, it didn't matter. My victory was here in the laughter, the love, the life we'd carved from the ashes. The backyard was still, the stars fading, as clouds drifted back, a gentle Seattle drizzle starting to fall. Serafina and I slipped inside her hand, still in mine, the warmth of the house enveloping us like a promise kept. Alina looked up from her laptop, grinning at some code she'd cracked, while Caspian sprawled on the couch sketching soccer plays in a notebook. The past year had been a storm, but we'd weathered it, building something stronger in its wake. I thought of Alice in Chicago piecing together her own quiet life, her calls to Caspian, a fragile thread to the kids. She was no longer my concern. Her choices a chapter closed. My heart was here with Serafina's soft laughter, Alina's fierce determination, Caspian's boundless energy, and the new life growing between us. The future stretched out, not a puzzle to solve, but a story to write together. As I locked the back door, the drizzle turned to a whisper, like the world exhaling, and I knew we were home.